in case any of y'all haven't met us yet, and then get started with our lesson on universal rights. So I'm Emma. I'm a senior here at UNC. I study global studies and Italian, and Italy is my focus country because I have studied abroad and worked there a couple different times.
Hi guys, my name is Claire. I'm a junior at UNC and I'm studying economics and Spanish with a minor in public policy. And my focus country is Spain because I studied abroad there last year for about 5 months.
And hey guys, I'm Annie. I am a senior at UNC. I'm a history and global studies major with a minor in education. I studied abroad in London in the UK, but I also taught in China the summer of 2015. So today I'm going to be talking about China.
All right, so today we are talking about human rights, universal rights. And so what we want to start out by doing is asking you all what you think should be universal rights for everyone. What should everyone have access to across the world? And so if you guys want to take a few minutes to think about it, you can write it down if you want. And then we're going to have a few volunteers come up and share what you all wrote, kind of get some ideas going.
And guys, like it can be anything like simple. Just like think about maybe, I don't know, like our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, like what are rights that everyone has? You guys kind of mentioned it, and when we asked you guys to think about like the values of the U.S., our last lesson. So just you guys have like freedom of something, come right up and tell us. We just kind of want to get a feel for what you're thinking. If you hit the little microphone, you can unmute yourself.
There you go.
It's a hospital-like setting, and the right of freedom of speech.
Could you repeat the first one? Sorry. Freedom of speech and what?
Education.
Awesome. That's a really good one.
Couple more volunteers.
All right, go ahead, Stephanie.
I think that everybody has the right to education, respect, and life.
Great. All right, maybe one more person have any ideas?
I'm Elizabeth, and I sort of feel like as we're getting more into being online and stuff, it should be a more basic right to have internet. Like maybe the government should pay for it, or like people who can't afford it should get some help so they can be able to use it.
Awesome. Great. So all y'all's ideas were awesome. And as Americans, we're pretty fortunate these things, everything that y'all said, are in fact rights that we have or things we have access to for the most part, and that these rights are held up and supported by our government and by our people as a whole. However, different people have different ideas and different interpretations of human rights. Oftentimes it might depend on the culture and largely depends on the government or who is ruling the country. And so today we're going to talk to you all about Spain, Italy, and China, and instances, whether in the past or in the present, that their governments had or continue to have different ideas about human rights, and that maybe kind of challenge what we see as what everyone should have access to, and how we kind of see human rights in America. So Claire, do you want to start by talking about Spain?
Yeah, so in order to talk about human rights in Spain, I'm sort of going to give you guys a little bit of a brief history of the last 100 years or so in Spain. Today, Spain's human rights, civil rights are really similar to what we have in the US, but it hasn't always been that way. And so that started in the 1930s with the Spanish Civil War. So kind of like the US had a civil war in the 1800s, Spain had a civil war in the 1930s, which started as a military coup. So the military forces tried to take control of the government, and it resulted in a war that lasted 3 years. And the war was really violent and really bloody, and it's especially a dark time in Spanish history because it really divided a lot of people within Spain. There are people within families that sort of turned against each other during this civil war. So it was a really bad time for Spain, and ended with Franco taking power of the government and becoming a dictator. So basically he just took full control of the government and sort of ran it the way he wanted to. And this was in 1939 that he took control. And so Franco got a lot of his ideas and inspiration from other dictators in Europe at the time. So I'm sure you guys have learned about Hitler a lot. That was one person that Franco sort of took his ideas from. And another is Mussolini, who Emma will talk about later, who was a dictator in Italy at the time. So Franco was in control from 1939 when he took control all the way to 1975, which was when he died. So for 36 years in the last century, he was in control. And during his rule, a lot of the basic freedoms and rights that we take for granted here in the US, and that people had previously taken for granted in Spain, didn't exist, which is kind of hard to imagine living in the US. Basic rights would just be taken away from you. And even after living in Spain, it's hard for me to imagine that only less than 50 years ago, people didn't have some of these basic rights. So, for example, there was a lot of censorship under Franco. So he controlled what the journalists and the media could publish. And especially if writers or journalists tried to write things that made Franco look bad or spoke out against him, they would get in trouble. And a lot of writers and artists at the time were either exiled and forced to leave the country, or they fled the country because they didn't feel safe, or they didn't want to be in a place where they couldn't express their views freely. And it was also illegal to express political views that opposed Franco. So imagine if it was illegal to have different political views than the current president. That's basically what it was like in Spain at the time. And in many cases, people who openly opposed Franco were put in jail or killed, and there was nothing they could really do about it. There was also no freedom of religion, which is another pretty important one that we have in the US. At the time, Catholicism was the only accepted religion, and the Catholic Church had a lot of influence in the laws. So, for example, divorce was illegal because that's not allowed under the Catholic Church. And even little things like Franco said all children who were born had to be given Christian names since it was a Catholic country. And then women especially did not have that many rights under Franco. He really believed that the role of women was to be in the house and care for the family. Women couldn't vote. They couldn't do a lot of jobs, such as be a professor at a university. So their role was really limited. And like I said, he was in power until 1975 when he died. And after Franco died, Spain actually had a pretty peaceful transition into having a government that's a lot more similar to what we have in the US now, with a constitution and a guarantee of basic rights and freedom. So they've really come a long way since this time under Franco, where there was such limited rights and freedoms. But although Spain has moved on, they've come a long way, it's still really fresh in the mind of a lot of Spaniards. So it was only 40 years ago that Franco died. So most people from the older generation still, remember growing up during these times when all their rights and freedoms were really restricted, and it really shaped the mindset of a lot of people who grew up during that time. And one thing I noticed when I was there is that people don't really talk about this time that much. You learn about it in history class because it is an important part of Spain's history, but it's still kind of a taboo topic. People don't sit around and discuss Franco, and I think part of it is because it's kind of a shameful part of Spain's history. And I think part of it might just be the memories are still kind of too close and painful for a lot of people who lived during this time in Spain, because in general, it was a really hard time for a lot of people in Spain. There's a lot of poverty and hunger, and you still see this mindset of a lot of older Spanish people who grew up really poor during this time. They're very strict about leaving lights on or not wasting food or things like that, because it was such a mindset for the general country at the time. But that being said, Spain and Europe in general are doing a lot to sort of acknowledge the bad things that happened during this time and move on from them. So, for example, in 2006, the European Parliament officially condemned the violations of human rights that took place under Franco. And a lot of things like statues of Franco that were in Spain, or streets or buildings named after Franco, are being taken down or changed to sort of show that, this isn't who Spain is, and these bad things that happened under Franco don't represent Spain as a country. So that's kind of a brief summary of Spain's history with human rights. And now Emma is going to talk to us a little bit about Italy and sort of the similar history that they have there.